pointed out the complicity of nationalist discourse with colonial discourse in the writing of Indian history. So all of these fueled the emergence of thinking through the question of culture. As Megan mentioned that I referenced in my introduction to genealogies of the Asian present, that all of us who today are talking about cultural studies don't have degrees in cultural studies, right? And that's indeed the case. So what made that possible? Why did people from so many different disciplinary backgrounds or so many anti-disciplinary people come into a space called cultural studies? And it's a bigger question that we will discuss in the panel. I'll try to keep these remarks short and then talk more about this work. So we developed in India and at CSCS, we developed our cultural studies within the national frame. Although within the national frame, not because we were nationalist, but because the point of critique of the nation, which drove our understanding of culture, that this presupposed the nation, the existence of the nation, right? So the main point of our critique was also a critique of nationalist forms of knowledge. And one way by which we felt to take this critique forward is through digitization. Yeah, this was in the 1990s. What did we mean by this? We said we need to try and look at ephemeral material, we need to look at pamphlets, we need to look at newspapers, we need to look at many things that are not yet in the realm of the digital in the days before the internet. But we said it needs to be digitized. We need to look at low-cost technologies, we need to look at keeping and navigating and preserving this data. And we had a huge polemic against mainly US-driven efforts to microfilm material in India. Right? So particular preservation technologies for the Indian context, which we felt were unreasonable, expensive, and not ultimately for the benefit of Indian intellectual spaces, but really to stock the US libraries. So this is something that we had marked our turn to the digital, right? So I think there was a sense already by the late 1990s that to actively perform the critique of the nation, we in India needed the digital. And again, just to mention here, we didn't mean the internet, we still had no idea of the potential of the internet, but simply electronic technology that processes, classifies, and preserves data. And we also felt we needed to cultivate the competence to tag and to annotate, to make connections, to make these new resources widely available through digitization. Right? So let me show you something which still exists. Please take a look. This is nearly a 20-year-old resource. We have managed to migrate this to DSpace. It's available courtesy the Center for Internet and Society, but with the resources of CSCS, which formally closed down in 2014. But this has an incredible amount of material that we collected over the years and digitized. It has also the efforts of our students to create dossiers and to try and figure out how to tag and how to annotate. Before these things became popular currency in geekdom, 20 years later, we were already doing this without understanding exactly what we were doing, but we felt this was important for energizing the space of the academy and for doing cultural studies. So in some sense, we do converge in our interests with the younger generation that I now engage with in this kind of space, which are the digital natives, if you like. But we don't really have the same interests, perhaps. And we are trying to both foreground the digital, because they are in many ways far more at home than us in what a young friend of mine called a post-national time space. Yeah? And again, to reference what Megan has been saying, so I want to ask maybe to our panel, when did post-national replace international? When did global replace international? And these are really interesting questions for speculation, I think, and might impact how we do cultural studies in Asia. So the inter-Asia phenomenon, very quickly, but before I come to that, one more comment about the kind of place that cultural studies occupied institutionally. I've written elsewhere about these concerns in India for cultural studies and how they moved from the margins of disciplines like English literature or sociology to occupy center stage in the 90s, when economic globalization began to impact the university, and there's pressure from above to create new curricula and compete for students, especially in the privately run undergraduate colleges. So this was one of our new sites for experimentation in developing curriculum. There was also new interest in thinking about culture in the Indian Institute of Science, which is 100 years old. It's the premier science institute in India. the Indian Institute of Management, in the National Law School of India. These are all key sites that interacted with our very small institute, where we created curriculum and tried to engage the students. In all of this, these spaces that were available for our experimentation, we tried to draw attention to how culture is